The 80s saw a flood of quintessentially American TV media that mainly starred advanced jets and choppers flown by noble war veterans. In this marvelous video, let's dive into the world of Airwolf. The show was named after a high-tech combat chopper, and the plot revolved around the crew that piloted it, a drama series of the 80s. Airwolf is fondly remembered by many for its devious storylines, cynical villains, and espionage missions undertaken by its characters. How did this show find its beginnings? Who created it? What were some of its most memorable episodes? Let's find out. Before we get into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Now hold it right there.
The intriguing odyssey of crafting the legendary Airwolf TV series. Before we dive into what the show was about and the classic characters that stole the audience's hearts, let's talk about how the show came to be in the first place. Donald P. Bellisario created the legendary TV show, the mastermind behind titular shows like Magnum P.I., JAG, Quantum Leap, and NCIS. Bellisario was in the US Marines during the 50s, and his military experience was visibly expressed in the show. Many also believed that the 1983 film Blue Thunder kick-started the subgenre centering on fighter aircrafts and choppers in movies and TV shows. The beginnings of Airwolf were brainstormed during filming the third episode of Magnum P.I. titled Two Birds of Feather, which was said to be inspired by a few episodes of Tales of the Golden Monkey. The third episode of Magnum P.I. was the moment Bellisario conceptualized the idea of a combat chopper and even thought of turning that particular episode into a standalone pilot. But an entire show wasn't authorized since significant talent and a plot had not yet been attached. Eventually, Bellisario melded the idea into what is known as Airwolf today. Airwolf premiered in January 1984 and ran for 55 episodes on CBS. It ran from 1984 to 1986, with an additional 24 episodes piled on with a whole new cast and production house in 1987. Did you also know that initially the pilot was a 2-hour movie that was re-released as a direct-to-video movie, then renamed Airwolf the Movie? The regular cast of season 1 through 3 included Jan Michael Vincent, Ernest Borgnine, Alex Cord, and a few more. For the second and third season, the studio wished to increase ratings and decided that the best path would be to add another female character into the mix of the show's espionage tales. For this purpose, Caitlin O'Shaughnessy, played by Jean Bruce Scott, joined the cast. This only partially helped ratings, and eventually, Bellisario left the production studio after season 2. Sadly, Jan Michael Vincent's alcoholism also adversely affected the performance of the show. For season 3, Bernard Kowalski took over as executive producer, but ratings still plummeted till the series was inevitably cancelled by CBS in 1987. The US network show revived the show for its 4th season. This season was created primarily to increase the number of episodes and make it viable enough for broadcast syndication. The only catch? It had a whole new production house and an entirely different cast, with Jan Michael Vincent playing a forgettable role in the first episode. Even a few other main characters were randomly killed off, given weak tributaries, and some were even miraculously brought back to life, which completely contradicted the plot that was meticulously built up in the first 3 seasons. The production of season 4 moved locations, and the budget was also reduced to 1/3 of that given to the original CBS show. The most iconic bit was the fact that the season 4 crew did not have access to the original Airwolf chopper, so all the shots from the helicopter were reused from earlier seasons. This took away from the authenticity of the newest season, and it almost set itself up for failure. One of the cast members revealed that the script for season 4 was already fixed before any talent was attached. This led to creative rigidity, which prevented the actors from building on their character even more. Even an attempted resurrection of the show didn't work, and it was sadly shelved permanently. exploring the episode of Airwolf. Now that we've gotten the show's sad end out of the way, let's revel in nostalgia and discuss a few episodes that made the show a fan favorite, while we also take a look at the greatness that came out of the first 3 seasons. The star of the show was actually the chopper it was named after. The first episode, titled Shadow of the Hawk, introduced us to essential characters of the show, such as Charles Henry Moffat, played by David Hemmings. The first episode also showcased a high high-tech helicopter, the Airwolf, which was technically a modified B-222 twin-engine light helicopter. The whole concept behind this chopper was for it to be a highly advanced weapon under the guise of a civilian helicopter. It's been described as a wolf in sheep's clothing. Airwolf was created as a deadly weapon with features that included turbojet engines and retractable weaponry, which included a missile launcher. The chopper was decked out in a twin-turbine rotor system and a wide array of firepower guns. The helicopter could fire anything from nuclear triple missiles to cannons. On top of that, it was equipped with 3D topographical imaging and was resistant to radar location. Airwolf was also believed to be the supersonic helicopter, which meant it could fly at speeds faster than light. Given the decade in which this concept was being explored, it proved to be a massive success. Charles Moffett was the man credited for creating the supersonic helicopter. Airwolf were an organization known as the Firm, which was a branch of the CIA, but during its first ever testing, Moffett aimed and fired at the senator, attacked the control center, and flew away to Libya in the Airwolf. Only a few survived the massacre, including the leader of the Firm, codenamed the Archangel, who was also responsible for developing the chopper. He was determined to retrieve the supercopper. After much deliberation with his assistant Gabriella Adamo, the two decided to bring ace chopper pilot Stringfellow Hawk out of retirement for this mission. Stringfellow Hawk, played by Jan Michael Vincent, was a Vietnam War veteran who lived as a recluse in the woods and worked as a Hollywood stuntman. Our first glimpse of the war veteran was the scenic picture of him sitting by the lake, wistfully playing the cello as bald eagles swooped down in the surface of the lake. Hawk believed that his brother was still alive after being MIA for nearly 14 years since the Vietnam War. Countering the firm's offer of $1 million to find Airwolf, Hawk only agreed to help if the firm launched an investigation looking into his brother's whereabouts. Meanwhile, Moffett swore his loyalty to Gaddafi and his armies in Libya. The creator of the Airwolf had also wiped out the chopper's program from the firm's computers, making it nearly impossible for the organization to track down their stolen weapon. Amidst all of this, Gabriella and Hawk had a budding romance grown between them. While feeling insatiably attracted to her, Hawk still did everything in his power to keep her at arm's length, since he believed all those he loved eventually died. But out of all the people he distanced himself from, Hawk was still in touch with his mentor, old friend, and someone who was a pilot himself during the Second World War, Dominic Santini, played by Ernest Borgnine. The two joined forces and decided to bring Airwolf to its rightful home. The rest of the pilot episode vividly portrayed Moffett's sadistic tendencies. He characteristically abused Airwolf's raw power to destroy 2 French Mirages and an American military ship completely. The firm had also deployed an undercover spy named Angela to Libya in the form of an exotic dancer in the Red Castle of Tripoli. Moffett took the dancer's spy into his own possession as payment for bringing Gaddafi the Airwolf. It was revealed that Angela was dead. She was either caught and killed for being an American spy, or her death was a coincidental accident. Either way, Gabriella was sent in her place as an operative to keep tabs on Moffett's every move. This also added to the urgency of the mission as the firm realized how the Airwolf's creator was using the chopper to destroy American targets. Hawk and Dominic were given fake identities, and the two were carted off to Libya. Hawk finally reunited with his girlfriend, who reassured him that she wouldn't face the same fate as Angela. She also revealed the location of Airwolf, which was hidden away at Gaddafi's summer palace. As Hawk and Santini rushed off to locate the chopper, Gabriella's cover was blown, and Moffett abducted her. The unhinged scientist tied her to a jeep in the middle of the desert and proceeded to torture her, depriving her of water for cruelly long periods of time. By this point, Hawk and Santini confronted Gaddafi's forces and fought through them to gain access to Airwolf. They boarded the combat helicopter and used its impressive arsenal to break through and set out in search of Gabriella. Alas, it was too late for her, as she died just as Hawk gathered her in his arms. Stringfellow Hawk had his lover torn away from him and became a man with his heart set on revenge. Thus began his ruthless rampage aboard Airwolf as he blasted apart what looked like most of Gaddafi's armies, shooting down their tanks, choppers, and fighter jets. After laying waste across the desert of Libya, Hawk finally faced Moffett. The crazed creator of the Airwolf vainly aimed his pistol at the chopper moments before he was blown to bits. After this, Hawk hid Airwolf in a secret location, determined to keep the chopper concealed till the firm helped him find his lost brother. Back home, Hawk found Archangel eagerly waiting for intel on the status of Airwolf. However, Hawk let him know that if Santini didn't receive a phone call from Hawk at least once a day, he would assume the worst and destroy the chopper. Hawk was taking the firm along for a ride for the sake of his brother. Airwolf would remain wired till the CIA organization was successful in their attempts to locate St. John, his brother. Another deal was made. Archangel knew that Hawk would be the target of other clandestine groups. The ace pilot was offered a salary and protection in exchange for his services. Hawk was allowed to fly Airwolf for the mission he'd undertake for the firm, and both sides would walk away from the ordeal with something to gain. The gut-wrenching pilot episode ended with Hawk playing the concerto yet again, this time lamenting of the death of Gabriella. The episodes that followed were thrilling stories of now firm agent Stringfellow going on dangerous international missions of espionage. For instance, in episode 3 titled Daddy's Gone a-Huntin', Hawk reluctantly took on an assignment for which he had to identify as a traitor who was about to steal a fighter jet and fly it down to Russia. Hawk realized that the traitor pilot was actually his old pal from the Vietnam War, who intended to steal the plane in order to reunite with his son, who had been captured. Hawk, in a bid to help his buddy, made a deal with the Russians to exchange Airwolf for the boy. But what the Soviets got was the complete annihilation of their air forces by the hands of Stringfellow commandeering the legendary chopper. In episode 4, titled Bite of the Jackal, Dominic Santini's civilian helicopter crashed amidst the desolate mountains of the archipelago, Mexico, but it was revealed that his chopper was actually shot down by the leader of a rival organization, Michael Brooke, who wished to usurp Archangel's possession at the firm. Michael also planned to use Santini as bait to seize Airwolf. Naturally, Hawk and his prime weapon came to Santini's rescue without jeopardizing the combat chopper. We now understand the way these episodes pan out. Each story was directed by a different director, and the events took place in different locations all over the world. The main premise remained the same. Hawk, accompanied by Santini, would fight opposing forces aided by the firepower of Airwolf. Season 1 saw innovative plots of the dangerous duo acquiring neurotoxins from the Soviets, uncovering a gold robbery, fighting former Nazis in Paraguay, contributing to the rescue of exiles captured by the Cuban colonel, protecting the president of an African nation against military coup, just to name a few. Season 2 of Airwolf saw a notable shift from its previously dark and violent themes to a more domestic ordeal. This was also the last season overseen by Bellisario before he left the production for good. The executive producer for Season 3 definitely took a few questionable creative liberties that may have pushed the show towards its inevitable cancellation. Scene sequences that were common to all 4 seasons were the aerial battle between Airwolf and other armed jets or copters. Although Season 3 did see a redundant amount of car crashes, stock footage from Universal's firm archives was borrowed, and aerial footage from previous seasons was reused. To give some credit where credit's due, Season 3 did have a pretty solid plot, but sadly, it wasn't good enough to keep the show on air for the CBS. The plot for Season 4 took an unexplainable turn. Hawk Stringfellow's brother was suddenly found, and Dominic Santini was also abruptly killed off. Archangel was replaced by a man named Jason Locke, and the firm became known as the company instead. The somewhat satisfactory outcome lay in the fact that Hawk was finally reunited with his brother St. John after several long years. That this is a fair conclusion of his character's story of the show. The main characters of this show. With a concrete storyline, stellar soundtrack, and awe-inspiring visuals, the military drama of the 80s wouldn't be remembered if it weren't for its impressive cast. Let's talk about the various characters that made Airwolf as memorable as it is today. Number 1. Stringfellow Hawk. Jan Michael Vincent was perfectly cast as Hawk. The actor had already established his name in Hollywood by starring in movies such as the 1971 film Going Home, alongside Robert Mitchum, the 1977 classic Damnation Alley, and countless more as the main character of Airwolf. Jan Michael was one of the highest paid actors for television series in that era. As an audience, we were introduced to Hawk as a brooding, mysterious pilot who was jaded jaded by the tragedies that life threw at him. There were moments when a deep melancholy revealed itself underneath his hardened exterior. He was a man who cared deeply about everything he loved, accompanied by a crippling fear of losing that as well. This came from the fact that his parents died in an accident when he was still a boy. Years later, his girlfriend at that time also suffered a similar fate, and his brother was missing for nearly 14 years. We see instances of how growing closer to someone terrified him when he started falling for Gabriella, just for her to be taken away from him. It's clear to us that he holds his path with a lot of pain. As an ace pilot, Stringfellow Hawk held the rank of captain during his time with the US Army. He was the only one apart from Moffat who knew how to fly the Airwolf. Whilst his nature might seem unpredictable and erratic, he was in fact a highly strategic man who always found a way to work through the loopholes. Hawk was also shown to be an appreciator of the arts, as his cabin in the woods was adorned with a collection of rare art that once belonged to his grandfather. But Jan Michael Vincent's personal problems with alcoholism and drug abuse during the filming process of the first 2 seasons led to his career suffering to the near point of extinction. Airwolf was one of the last major roles in which Jan Michael played the lead character.
Actually, no, I'm just quite bored.
Number 2. Charles Henry Moffat. The sociopath Henry Moffat was a prime villain for the series. He was a British scientist who worked for the American government and always had hints of madness glinting beneath his genius. Moffat had a personal beef with the US Senator William Dietz, and he exacted this by unleashing all hell during Airwolf's trial run. Moffat was the genius behind the billion-dollar creation that came to be such an essential asset for the US military. Moffat was played by David Hemmings, a talented actor who had starred in cult films like Deep Red and Thirst. He had also made cameos in Belisario's Magnum P.I. David Hemmings really delivered the unexplainable creepiness that Moffat oozed. The unhinged scientist was a man who unabashedly got his rocks off by sadistically torturing women, even went so far as saying to one of his crewmates, "There's nothing wrong with a little perversion, so long as you don't hurt yourself." At the same time, hurting women for his twisted fantasies the entire time. His psychopathic and cruel tendencies played out quite a bit in the 2-hour-long pilot. The fact that these were really part of the scenes of the show was a big deal for the network television of the 80s. Although Moffat's actions in the first episode set up the rest of the show, he didn't just steal away the advanced prototype model of Airwolf, but also destroyed its blueprint from the firm's computers, making Hawk's model the rarest of its kind, allowing him to gain leverage over the organization. Number 3. Dominic Santini. Ernest Borgnine played the endearing Dominic Santini. Borgnine had served in the US Navy for a significant chunk of his life before he dabbled in acting. He gained prominence in Hollywood for his role in the 1955 film Marty. He went on to star in cult movies like The Devil's Rain, Deadly Blessing, and Escape from New York. Ernest Borgnine as Santini was a character with an infectious laughter and someone who brought a ray of sunshine into Stringfellow's sad existence. The two went a long way, with Dominic being a great friend to Hawk's father during their time as pilots during World War II. Santini suggested that the Valley of God was the perfect spot to hide Airwolf. Later in his life, Santini still retained his connection to flying by running a chopper for rent service named Santini Air, which catered for Hollywood productions. He would rent out helicopters from his base of operations in California and often step into the role of a stuntman for aerial view shots. Santini was summoned by Hawk to a life of adventure yet again from the somewhat tame existence. Before he knew it, Dominic sat next to Stringfellow and played an essential role in carrying out classified missions for the firm. Stringfellow Hawk and Dominic Santini made a dynamic duo whose character traits balanced each other out just right. Number 4. Archangel. Michael Coldsmith Briggs III was most commonly referred to by his codename Archangel. He was the deputy director of the firm, who was also credited for developing Airwolf alongside Moffat. Archangel played by a fantastic actor known as Alex Cord. He was best known for his role in the 1966 Western drama Stagecoach as the Man in White. Archangel was Hawk's official and unofficial link to the firm, and the person to go to when the CIA's resources were direly needed. The Man in White which dealt purely with the facts and logic, even going so far as to manipulate his employees to gain what the firm needed. Archangel was responsible for giving out missions to Hawk and would accompany them on rare occasions. Hawk and Archangel go way back, as the two knew each other over their entire time with the firm. The banter between Hawk and Archangel was friendly and funny, and he would spite Santini at times. Archangel is seen as a man dressed mostly in white, with a dark lens covering one eye in the fashion of an eye patch. When Moffat attacked the base during Airwolf's test run, nearly everyone was killed, and Archangel was left gravely wounded. He lost his eye and also gained a limp, having to resort to walking with a cane at all times. Number 5. Caitlin O'Shaughnessy. Caitlin, played by Jean Bruce Scott, was a character added to the Airwolf team in Season 2 in an attempt to raise ratings. She began making regular appearances on the show, with her starring out as a police pilot from Texas. Regardless of ratings, her character was an iconic one, as she delivered one-line zingers such as, "You try anything, Catboy. I'm gonna make what he did to you look like love taps." She made her first appearance at episode 16 of the second season, titled The Truth About Holly, in which she showed up at Santini Air looking for some work. She was initially hired as a needed for rental service, but was eventually promoted to the position of backup pilot for the Airwolf team. She was described as a feisty redhead who wasn't a pushover and stood her ground by her truth. We must remember that by this point, the whole tone of Airwolf had switched from dark espionage action to episodes like Santini dealing with a cranky baby. Caitlin's addition to the crew was a breath of fresh air in a show that had forgotten what it was really about. Why it's a must-watch show till now. We know the plot and the characters and why the ingenious show ended. Airwolf is remembered by the kids of the 80s as an exciting show jam-packed with helicopter action. The 80s started out with Reagan as president, who seemingly changed the philosophy of the country. He emphasized the US as the leader of the free world, liberty, and human rights based on individualism. He adamantly opposed the Soviets and revolutionized the US military to become more technological enhanced. A living embodiment of all of this was Belisario, who manifested the sentiment and created Airwolf. The show's predecessors created the blueprint for it. Movies and series, such as the 1982 film Firefox, starring Clint Eastwood. The summer of 1983 saw the release of Blue Thunder. Even the show Magnum P.I., co-created by Belisario, shared the same spirit. The common themes revolved around post-Vietnam War vets who operated advanced vehicles, sometimes produced from the Russians. However, the Vietnam War vet genre was made popular following the success of the 60s show named Whirlybirds, which also propelled Airwolf into the audience's favor. The show started out as being well-rounded, with an outstanding balance of comedic relief and some of the most sinister undertones that held your rapt attention. The show was heavily rooted in the Cold War and post-Vietnam War sentiment, as well as the way Hawk presented himself. The characters aren't lazily written, they have depth, and the makers ensured that their show focused on interpersonal relationships just as much as they did on the technical aspects. Given the decade it was made, Airwolf's characters showed impressive character development, and it's a trip to see their growth as the show progresses. Stringfellow Hawk and Dominic Santini's buddy pair up instantly and become a fan favorite, as the pair were known to be one of the most celebrated duos on television. While a considerable part of the original cast had passed away, their legacy still lives on in Airwolf books and graphic novels that were published nearly 3 decades after its first release. The show was also generous with its guest appearances, one of which was Bryan Cranston. He guest starred as a jilted lover who held a group of sorority girls hostage. Fun fact, the actor met his now wife Robin Dearden on the show. The signature theme was created by Grammy-winning composer Sylvester Levay. In fact, most people remember the show because of its theme song. As we mentioned, the idea of a highly advanced helicopter, disguised as a civilian one, with a stellar crew on board, was a hit in the decade. Every episode released felt like a new action movie for the audience at the time. 80s kids look back on that show with sweet nostalgia. Airwolf is a must-watch show, as it was way ahead of its time. It's fascinating to observe how highly evolved technology and weaponry were creatively brought to life on set, with the attention to detail being mind-blowing. The bottom line is, if you want to indulge in a classic 80s military drama packed with cleverly written characters, sadistic villains, international espionage missions, a wounded main character, and a super chopper capable of destroying a tiny country, then Airwolf should be your go-to.
Line and stand by for turbo ignition.
Marvelous verdict. Here we come to the end of our explanation of Airwolf, the dynamic TV show of the 80s, changed the game for military action dramas we saw in the years to come. The performances delivered by each actor and the compelling plots portrayed in the first 2 seasons are what made the show stand out as a unique piece of art. Hawk's bittersweet journey after his time in the Vietnam War, a clandestine military organization desperately attempting to regain control of a superweapon and its own share of cheesy romance. Airwolf is a magnificent show that deserves your attention. While we also conveniently ignored how the plot was butchered in its season 4 reboot, would present-day cinema do the show justice in the form of a movie reboot? And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.